Well, welcome everyone to a special Youth Specialties panel discussion on the State of Youth Ministry report. This report that we partnered with Barna to do at NYWC this last year. And when we were trying to think of all the different people that we wanted to have conversations with around this report, we started to realize that we had all of these blog authors and thought leaders that could get together and share their thoughts on it. And so I put out a call, and we were able to collect some really great perspectives from lots of different youth ministry settings. And so they're joining me on this call today to walk through what the State of Youth Ministry report means in their ministry settings, places where the information, hits right at home with what they're struggling with or working through, as well as some areas that maybe rub against it and are held in tension with it. And so we're going to welcome those types of discussions in this conversation today. And my name is Jacob Eckeberger. I'm on staff with YS. And so before we get into all of the back and forth, I wanted to go around the virtual room so that everybody watching this panel discussion can get to know who's sitting in here with me. So Eric, you start us off, man.
Sure. My name is Eric Iverson. I am a student here in Louisville, Kentucky at Southern Seminary. I work with our undergrad school. We have an undergrad school at Southern called Boyce College. And so I'm working on the student life team there. And so, this is an exciting, to read the report and understand it, is we've got all these students who are coming in, and the issues that students in high school and junior high are facing are similar to what we're dealing with here as well. And so I'm from Minnesota and did youth ministry up there for a long time. And I call myself a recovering youth pastor, and got to, just a joy to be here. And my wife and my two kids live here with me, and we're having a blast and just trying to encourage students. We're training students for ministry as well. So the information that's here is really helpful to how we train and what we're talking about and how we equip teachers to be able to work with students. So that's just a little bit about me. So I'm glad to be here.
All right, Chase, go for it, man.
Hey, I'm Chase Snyder. I live here in East Tennessee in Knoxville. I've been doing student ministry for a little over a decade, and a lot of that time was spent in nonprofit ministry, working with churches in school settings and with Christian camping to help partner with churches and work alongside of churches during that time. And I'm currently a family pastor with Crib to College underneath my oversight here at our church right now. And so especially looking at this report, man, how can we encourage parents and students at different ages, at different spots, even within the middle school and high school, and as churches, to just get us outside of our comfort zones and outside of this area. So I'm excited to dig in with it.
Well, next, hey everybody, I'm Corey Jones from Carrollton, Georgia, the West End, and I'm execute of Next Gen Finance, and glad to speak and enjoy being able to help people take the next step in leadership. So I'm just a big advocate for finance.
Todd, go for it, man.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Todd Jones, and just a pleasure, honor to be here and to kind of discuss this. So thank you, YS, for allowing me to be here. I've been in youth ministry for about 10 years now in a few different churches, and been able to just kind of see the spectrum. And this report kind of affirms what I've seen over the years, and it's just really encouraging to see in the areas where we've done well, and then also to learn areas where we need to improve, and maybe contextualize some of the information in this to our specific ministry. I'm currently at a church a little outside of Seattle, and so just the culture differences. I'm from Southern California, so to see just what God is doing up here as opposed to where I was at, and it's really exciting to be able to work with other youth pastors and just encourage students as well. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my name is Nick. Nick Mance. I'm a youth pastor in Iowa City, Iowa, and been doing youth ministry for over a decade now in various capacities, from working in a volunteer to full-time youth pastor to running nonprofits in similar circumstances, and being able to just jump in and talk about the Barna report and the effects that we are seeing with students and families, and how we can utilize the resources here to our abilities to train people to help make our ministries function better, to better impart the gospel and to take it to students and their families and to the world, is an amazing opportunity. And so thanks you to YS for hosting this and letting us all jump in and just pick apart some of this stuff and to share what we've seen and hopefully are learning from it.
Cool. Hey everyone. My name is Chandler Bailey. Youth Specialties, thank you so much for being on here, allowing me to be on here. This is awesome. I'm glad to impart and give information to our audience here. I'm a recent graduate from North Carolina University, where I obtained my undergrad in media ministry and my master's in Christian ministry. I mean, as a youth pastor, sort of like during that time of getting my master's in Christian ministry, I've been serving as youth pastor of a multi-site church here in South Carolina. Our base campus is in Columbia, South Carolina, Orangeburg, South Carolina, and Florence, South Carolina. I have the privilege and I guess awesome Jesus burden of overseeing all three youth ministries at every site, even though I primarily teach out of our main campus in Columbia. What's so awesome is I have great help. We have great leaders. I got middle school ministers who are over the middle school ministry. And I recently, this year, we've officially launched, we sort of like unofficially launched last year. We launched our college and career ministry for the church. So it's been an awesome experience. This state of youth ministry report, everyone who's watching live right now, is completely awesome. It's gonna be a great conversation, and I'm glad I'm here with this diverse audience and team to interject my opinions, my reflections as we go over this report. So I'm excited to be here.
I'm Scott Talley, and I've been in ministry for about 14 years now. And just in the time I've been doing that, just kind of seeing God work, see God use me and the ministry in a mighty way. And back in December 2015, I graduated Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary with my doctorate. Wrote my doctorate thesis on helping youth ministries win. And so trying to think about scorecards and things like that. But one of the things I'm really excited about today is just talking through this kind of the contextualization part of it, but also what can we do to kind of dive in and look at our youth ministries and to kind of apply what we've learned from this study and to our ministries and become stronger and grow. The goal is for us to impact students. And so I'm just excited for this conversation and glad that YS has allowed us to even have this conversation with you guys today. So just looking forward to what's going to happen here today.
What's up, guys? You there? My name is Keith Trollinger, and I'm the student pastor over here at Southern Hills Christian Church in Carrollton, Georgia. I work with Corey Jones in this same panel, and I've been in student ministry for about 15 years now, and I love it. I'm very passionate about campus ministry, and I'm excited about this discussion, and I appreciate Youth Specialties and the work that they put in to getting this report out to all of us. But I'm definitely excited about the conversation, especially in the busyness in the life of teens. It's something that we here at So Hills deal with quite often. And we struggle at times navigating through the busyness of teenagers, predominantly because we target a lot of high school athletes and junior high athletes. And so it definitely impacts what we do week in and week out. So I'm super excited about this discussion, and I'm grateful and thankful for you guys allowing me to be here.
Hey, I'm Matt Larkin. I'm everybody's favorite thing, a denominational leader. That's I know the best. But I serve in the Advent Christian denomination, working with youth workers nationwide as kind of a resource. I really get to serve in an equipping role and helping them get access to good materials and things of that nature. So it's a really awesome opportunity for me to interact with and support youth workers around the country. And looking forward to what this discussion may lead to in terms of what it could mean for our denomination and certainly how our denomination reflects other denominations and networks around the country too. So thanks for having me.
Well, like I said, we've got this incredible panel of folks. And if you are watching the live stream on YouTube, there is a chat, a live chat at the top right side of that screen. Jed has already said something. I gave him a good bicep curl. So if you want to engage with some questions there, my job for this conversation is going to ask questions to this panel from the Barna report, as well as if you've got some questions that can fit into the conversation, drop them into that live chat. I'll try to steer the conversation to be able to fit as many of those as possible. And one of the things that I wanted to do to start out our back and forth on this is in the Barna report, one of the busiest one of the toughest things that youth workers said that they struggle with is working with teens' busy schedules. And so on page 32 in the Barna report is where that conversation begins. And there's this chart showing that youth pastors rank, 74% of youth pastors ranked busyness of youth as the biggest challenge in youth ministry. And as a youth worker myself and being in conversations with youth workers from all across the U.S., that seems to be pretty universal. Would anyone want to share on this panel your experience with that? Do you all resonate with that? Does anybody want to raise a hand and say, you know what, my kids just aren't busy at all?
Jacob, I can go ahead and share a little bit. I know from our perspective, I work with high school and junior high, and totally relate to the athletic side of things. And but it's even more than that. We're finding that students across the board are just busy. Our school district this year actually decided to say, hey, we realize that students are busy. We're actually going to start school an hour later so they can get more sleep in the morning. But that has now pushed activities back another hour. So they go to school until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Then after that, they go to sports, they go to show choir, they go to dance, they go to band, whatever it may be. And we have students that we're also saying, hey, we want you to jump in and join leadership on our end. And most of our kids are saying, you know, we're not getting home till 10 o'clock at night, and then we have 3 hours of homework. And so just seeing the busyness that is developing, I would completely relate to the 74% and say, yeah, this is something that we as ministers of the gospel need to find ways to still be engaging in student and family lives and being there to assist them, to show them the love of Christ. And if we have to, I mean, let's take it outside the church. If busyness is where they're going to be, maybe we could step into some of the activities and some of the events that they're taking a part in and really take the gospel to them in their community as well and help them to do that.
I would definitely agree with that point. I know for our ministry, one of the things that we do, because like I said, we spend so much time trying to reach athletes, and that's really our target audience with our core group of students when we do campus ministry, that we have found that, you know, typically our students are incredibly busy. And so a lot of times when we are taking students out to dinner, or if we're trying to impact a group of students, a lot of times that conversation begins at 8 p.m. at night because they're getting out of football or they're getting out of baseball, lacrosse, whatever sports that they have. And so what we have found is that instead of trying to compete with that schedule, with their schedule, we do a lot of campus devotions with athletes after football practice and baseball games and stuff. We found that we're just taking a lot of the curriculum that we teach our students on Wednesday nights, and we're just applying it to them in their sports. So typically students that can't attend life group or they can't attend our service, we're still impacting that student. In fact, we're impacting all of their friends at the same time because we're still teaching them the same pieces of scripture that we teach our own students. And so instead of trying to compete with getting students to our campus week in and week out, we're just taking the word to them and basically communicating that truth in their own environment. So coaches are hearing it, other athletes, and even parents. I can't tell you how many times I've had parents that'll come out after I speak to them, or our junior high pastor will speak to them, and they'll say, man, I needed to hear that as a parent. It's been a really cool thing.
One of the things that we are noticing in student ministries is that high school and middle school is really being pushed towards college. And so as they are preparing for school, college used to be this time where you could figure out your character and understand relationships and also develop what you're going to be one day. But now college is really just a time for you to manage your resume. And so it's very precisely chosen. And I understand student loans and the importance of education. I'm not downplaying that. But this pressure to know exactly what you're going to do by the time you're 16, 17, I think is really impacting how parents and students are both looking at school, extracurriculars, and everything else that they're involved. And so I think that they're way too busy just looking to the future. And some of them, I'm afraid, are missing the present.
To jump in on that, we have the busyness I see in our schedule is that I now see students who are getting burned out. Like we have students who have the opportunity to go play at the collegiate level, but they are, and they're student leaders in my ministry, but they're getting burned out and don't know if they still want to play baseball or football at the collegiate level because now they're burned out because that's all they've been pushing and pushing and pushing. And so spiritually, I'm trying to come alongside them and encourage them and disciple them and invest in them, but and encourage them not to get burned out spiritually either, because we don't want that to happen. And so that's one of the things I look at when I saw this was the busyness of youth, is we don't want them to get so busy that they drift away or forget about their spiritual journey or their spiritual walk.
Yeah, I would like to say in my neck of the woods, when I look at the biggest challenges for youth ministry in 2016, for youth pastors, my world, what I experience is the business of students, but I would like to flip what Nick said, as far as the 74% business of youth. In my church, I'm experiencing 74% business of parents. I realize that our youth come out to our major events, but as far as the consistent level of youth ministry participation, our parents are busy. So they'll come to church for themselves and not bring their teenagers, but they'll bring their teenagers to me or their high school students during crisis, during counseling. They'll call upon the church in a heartbeat. So I have a lot of empathy for any of you all youth workers or youth volunteers, youth pastors, directors, whatever your titles are out there in youth ministry. And you're realizing that the students want it, but the parents are emphasizing in the homes. I find that being a challenge too. It's like a desensitization of the importance of youth ministry outside of the crisis zone. That's what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, Chandler, I see exactly what you're saying when I feel like youth always loses. Like youth group is always the losing cause. I joke like, hey, I can't come to youth group, I have sports. And I'm always like, why don't you tell sports you can't come to sports because you have youth group, right? But that is not how it works, And kind of going back to what Keith said, man, I think you nailed it. We as youth workers need to switch our paradigm of what youth ministry looks like, because it's so easy for us to, we count heads, right? And we determine how well our ministry is doing based on the heads that are there, because we're hired by an organization. And so our ministry happens within our organization. But kind of like Keith was saying, man, we got to hit the streets, right? So our ministry should be to students, not to the attendance numbers, right? And so when we go out to the people, students, our ministry is going to look different based on our different contexts, man. You might have a whole bunch of people in your within your ministry that don't actually show up to youth group, right? But you're still ministering to students, you're still in their lives, you're still doing, it's just looking different, right? And the number of students that you touch during the week doesn't necessarily have to happen during youth group time. You're still effectively ministering to them. And so I think that's one way that I'm learning to kind of switch my paradigm of what I think effective ministry is, and not judge it based on the attendance, but judge it on how many students I'm able to actually connect with and touch, whether it's on school campuses or whatever.
Hey, Todd, how do you, and maybe Keith too, like how does that paradigm shift get communicated to a pastor or whoever's supervising you? How do you communicate that to them so that they're like, oh yeah, I'm down with that. That makes sense. Go for it. How did that work for you all?
Great question. Great question. I know, I worked for a pastor in the past that was like, hey, you got to be in the office 8 hours a day, right? Like if you're out of the office, like, I don't know what you're doing, some crazy stuff or something, but that's a great question. You have to be on the same page as your leadership, as the pastor above you, whoever is the person that's kind of developing what your job description looks like, I would suggest just to be upfront with them and talk to them about the need. I mean, we have the Barna report. Use that as information to present to your advisor, your senior pastor, whoever is above you, just to get them on the same page. I think communication is the most important to that. I don't know, Keith, what do you think?
No, I was going to say, dude, I'll call your lead pastor if you want me to and have a conversation with him. But like, I'm just super passionate about it. And so I totally agree. It's a primary function of our role. You know, I would say to any student pastor that being on campus, and you got to get creative. I live in an environment where it's okay. And our campuses seem to be comfortable with it. And there are ways to navigate around that. I promise you there are ways. But I would just communicate to your pastor. I mean, dude, this is what we do. And when I'm on campus, man, it invigorates me and inspires me and breathes a fresh new vision every single August and every single January, being around those students and hearing the conversation. And if you can communicate that to your lead pastors, man, and just say, hey, listen, God gave me this passion and this love, and dude, it's there and it exists. And I promise you, you know, one big win is that nobody is going into those schools or on those athletic environments and having conversations with teenagers. And the kids freaking love it, man. They love it when they see your face walk up and they're like, dude, Keith, what is up, man? Like, hey, I got to tell you what happened last night. And, you know, it's a great thing.
How do we embrace that culture and that fight, though, of like being on a church staff and people don't understand that that's work, you know, going to the cafeteria, going to the lunch, going on campus. And so like to change this, like this report here about the business of youth and going where they are. And like you said, switching, don't count the numbers in the seats, but look at our impact and our effectiveness. How do we do that? How do we embrace that awkwardness and say, you know what, I could care less, to that youth worker who's concerned with people on their church staff, on their team saying, well, I'm not working unless I'm in the office. If I'm not printing schedules or programming, this is not work. Like, how do we embrace this next level relational ministry? You know what I'm saying?
I would say a couple of things, just some ideas, and then I'll shut up. But I would say one idea is that take your lead pastor with you to a campus and let him see for himself. Number one, I would also say number two, have a coach, have a teacher, call your lead pastor and say, I need your guy on my campus. I need your girl on my campus. I need them to see what missional field we have here, and nobody's tapping into it. And so I would leverage the campus to call your church or to call whoever your administrator is. I would leverage them to say, hey, listen, I need your student pastor to get involved. Will you please allow them a couple of hours during the week to come on my campus and to minister or to lead our students? And but the first one is another big win. Get them to see the vision. You know, it's like Nehemiah walking in and seeing the wall, dude. And he had his people coming in there, and they're like, dude, we catch the vision. Let's build this sucker together. That would be my 2 cents in it.
I pushed our staff to adopt a school this is where we're going to invest. We're going to invest in a local school. This is where we're going to invest. And so now we're in 5 schools that we've adopted. And so like I'm chaplain of the football team. We have people who are basketball coaches. We have people who are there who are our senior pastor leads chapel at another high school, was a chaplain there. So like we adopted and we go in, we're there. And so it started off by taking our senior pastor or taking someone with us in there to see what this is about, see what the love is, see the passion, and see these students grow in Christ. And so now we are then able to then partner with them, and we bring them out here, and then we make dinner for the football team. You know, we do whatever we can to love on the schools so that at the same time the schools allow us even in there to go and invest. So it's kind of works both ways there. But what I love is what you're just saying there, Keith, is go all in, you know, dive in and get on the campus, get on the students' turf, and let them just allow us the relationships to happen that way.
Scott, you said something really important too earlier, that letting the parents saw you too, right? The parents knew you were there, which is they're the employer of your pastor. So that would be good, you know, just like, yeah, that was just another good point you made, that you're visible with them. Sorry.
Yeah, and you can add to social media. what you're doing, because vision is contagious. And so as you're hanging out with these football teams or you're talking to people, you got to share those stories. And that's part of being a pastor, is that you're sharing what God's doing in the community. And social media is a great way to do that. I mean, what pastor, what parent's going to argue if you're gone 2 hours in the morning, but you have proof, live time, that you're doing ministry and that you are investing in the community? I mean, it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah, and so one of the things that's interesting is that, oh, sorry to cut you off, Matt.
No problem.
One of the things that's interesting is I think we're hitting on this idea of contextualization and how important that is in our ministries, but also this balance between being present in the spaces on the turf of our students, while also, running programs and making sure that those are prioritized in some way. And I would love y'all's input on, because Ryan asked a great question of, is it okay to permission kids to not show up to youth group, to church, if they're actually deeply passionate about the extracurricular activity? And I think that Ryan's touching on a great opportunity for us to discuss what role, like kind of the ebb and flow of life, plays in our mentorship and in our discipleship of students, knowing that there are some kids that truly are passionate about their sport or their debate team or their chess club or whatever it is that might interfere with youth group and our programming, and how do we support them, support their gifts and talents as a part of our mentorship relationships. Does anybody want to weigh in on that, or is that off base? Does that not connect?
I think it's a great question. I think it's one I've run into many times. We have students who want to be on leadership with us, but they have other ministries going on. And we have our leadership students fill out like a covenant agreement saying we're going to give time to this. And I've had many students come up on football teams. Students were on show choirs, big out in the Midwest where I'm at. And they're like, we can't be here because, this date falls on a show choir competition or a football game. And we always ask them, we're like, just because you're in an activity, it doesn't disqualify you from being in servant leadership. In fact, a lot of servant leadership takes place outside the church. And I think in that sense, yeah, we do contextualize it. Let it take place where they're at. We have students who are active in FCA programs at their schools because they've been trained in leadership and discipleship, and they're using that to that advantage. And for us, it's like, man, if you're going to be out there and you're going to be on the sports field and you're going to rep Jesus to these kids out there who don't know him in the midst of like all that testosterone and that frustration and anger, and you're going to be the light of Jesus to them, by all means do that. If you're going to be at dance and where it could be very provocative and you want to be like, no, I want to rep Jesus to these ladies and to the people who are watching and like say everything that I do is for the glory of the kingdom, by all means, that's leadership. That's discipleship at its finest, is being out there in the mid. Don't understand to follow. Jesus took ordinary people into ministry among people, not in one rooted context within a church building. He got out in the town with people, and I think that's what we need to be doing, is taking our ministries, breaking down the walls of the church, and sometimes storming out of it, and being in the midst of the community with these kids and taking the gospel where it matters, which is where they're at every day of the week.
So do we attack this busyness by getting busy with the busyness? You see what I'm trying to say? Like, do we attack it by, does the everyday youth worker who's in the trenches actually say, you know what, instead of trying to get everybody into my program, let me start programming outreach situations. Let me encourage student leaders out there into the campus, into the schools.
Yeah, I'm definitely not one for making life even more busy for people. I think everybody in this chat, everybody who's watching, and people who are going to watch later, I think we could all say our lives are already busy with ministry and life and our marriages and whatever it may be that we're in. School, all that can already be busy. I think it's about us prioritizing where we see the need. Where are we going to be putting our focus? Where is that going to be? Is it going to be in our youth programming on one night of the week? Or are we willing to maybe sometimes reevaluate and say, is the programming the key? Or is it maybe being with the students where they're at? And I think in a lot of ways, I think we need sometimes to rethink what we're doing. Speaking from my perspective, we're actually trying to not have Sunday morning programming at our church. And we tried to present that to our senior pastor, and he goes, so you don't want a job? And I was like, well, no, I still want to make money. But we are advocating for building community and realizing that it doesn't just take place within the church, but it takes place outside of it. We are pushing for that programming to be moved outside of just a building. And so I think it's about where are we focusing our priorities and what is our mission? And I think in a lot of ways it could look different, but definitely no, I'm not advocating for more busyness. I think we need to maybe pull the busy out of busyness sometimes.
I think another element that I don't want to see get lost in all this is that we need to find ourselves getting on a similar page to parents as well. Another thing that was identified in the report is that while 74% of youth workers think their kids are too busy, only 11% of parents thought their kids were way too busy. In fact, 58% of them thought their kids were in balance, and 10% a smaller percentage than that thought their kids weren't busy enough. So there's clearly a dissonance there between youth workers and parents, which needs to be addressed somewhere. We need to find a way to get on the same page as those who are responsible for raising these kids, and find our way to some common ground there. I think, just from my own experience, I don't think there's any doubt that there are a lot of kids that are way too busy and are getting themselves burnt out because of it. So helping parents to understand that, I understand the pressures of prepping for college and all that goes into that, but helping parents to understand that there does need to be a balance in life, and there does need to be prioritization of spiritual life and life in Christ, and that needs to be, and there needs to be time dedicated to that, whether it's in youth group or in other settings. We do need to help in equipping parents to help their own kids balance out their life in some way. I agree with everything that's been said about getting out there and addressing kids where they are and helping them to embrace their faith out in public. But we also do need to work on that balance. That's an important thing too. Kids need balance as they grow up, and a lot of them don't have it right now.
Yeah, that's a great thought, Matt. And Aaron asked a good question, and I think segues into another area of topic we can talk about, which is the goals and priorities of youth ministry. And so part of the Barna report that we looked at had senior pastors, youth pastors, and parents rank the goals and priorities of youth ministry. And Aaron's question, his first question was, how do we build disciples in our new culture? And so as a part of that, what's interesting is that on page 13, it shows that the goals of youth ministry, according to senior pastors and pastors, at the very top, 71% of senior pastors and 75% of youth pastors say that discipleship and spiritual instruction is like one of the main goals. And if you go all the way down to the second to least favorite goal is evangelism and outreach to parents, right? And then the very last one is serving the church body. And so there's some discussion, I think, that we can have here around how do all of these things mix together, right? Like, how does discipleship and spiritual instruction, building relationship, evangelism and outreach to teens, which only gets 29 and 24% responses, as opposed to discipleship and instruction, which is 71 to 75%. Does anyone want to share thoughts on that? Does that connect at all?
Well, can I ask a question with that? Because when I was reading through this, I mean, that was one of the things that kind of I actually wrote out here. This blows my mind because so the question is, evangelism and outreach to teens is at 29%, and for senior pastors and youth pastors, it's at 24%. And then you look at evangelism and outreach to parents is so low. And so the question that I have when I look at that, my question is it so low in both those realms because outreach to students, because that's so low, is it just going to be natural that outreach to parents is low? Because when we outreach to these kids that are not connected to a local church, one thing that I find is that their parents need the gospel just as much, if not more, than the teenager. And so there's a large base of people that live in our culture, parents that aren't even connected to the local church and have no relationship with the local church. And so is it that both of those are that low because outreach to students outside of your local congregation is low, so naturally outreach to parents is going to be low? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Oh, yeah. And I think one of the things may be that a lot of our student ministries are based upon the 1960s, 1970s model, when the nation wasn't in this post-Christian society that we're now in. And so a lot of the areas and focuses that our churches, maybe not necessarily a youth worker who's kind of getting it and it's snapping, but just the expectation of a church is that there are plenty of programs, and the church as a whole may not see the need for evangelism outside of the walls. As we talk about, 11% of parents think that their kids are too busy and the rest of them don't. Maybe we have the 11% in our churches, and there are legitimately some kids who aren't too busy in our communities because we, like you're saying, haven't done a good job at outreach. And so I think that this comes back to contextualization. For me, if I was asked which one's more important with discipleship, well, I kind of hub discipleship in as that catch-all. I would say that discipleship is serving and evangelism and sharing your faith and witnessing and all of those aspects within it. It's this combination of it. And so I think that whenever we start pulling those out, like we were saying earlier, you got to start asking the question, why? Why are we doing this? What is the purpose? How are we investing in that? Because I think, Keith, as you're saying, man, parents do get neglected in that. Well, why? Maybe because we're built on a whole program based of the 60s and 70s where parents took their kids to school. So parents took them to church. So they were already here. We just haven't caught up with that in student ministry.
I actually see discipleship being a priority as a really good thing. I agree with Chase, actually, in regards to that being an umbrella that should encompass everything else. You flip over to page 15 in that study, though, you see where there's maybe a little more dissonance, especially if you look at winning new believers to Jesus being 32% list that as a priority in discipleship. I mean, that's where the dissonance is defining what discipleship even means. That seems to be the really big problem in a lot of this. And not so much where you prioritize discipleship versus a lot of these other things, but what discipleship actually means to youth pastors who answer these questions. We've got to kind of work out that discipleship, the idea of discipleship really encompassing instruction, mentorship, and lots of other things. And that seems to be where the issue is here.
Yeah, totally. It's, we want to make disciples of Christ. That's what our goal is. Well, what did Jesus do, man? Like, he literally just walked around telling people about the good news. Like, that was his goal. And so if we want to disciple students to be more like Christ, in my opinion, that just falls straight under it. If that's our goal, in discipleship as a whole, we got to be pushing for them to win new believers and to follow Jesus.
Can I ask a question to you guys? How are y'all doing discipleship? I mean, are you doing like it says all about building relationships, evangelism, all these are different categories underneath it here, but how are you guys doing in your ministry settings? How are you discipling teenagers?
I can answer that question because I was going to comment and say this earlier regarding the goals. What I found in inner city urban youth ministry, our youth ministry is in the heart of an urban community, very, very urban. And you can lose sight of your North Star so quickly. You can focus on academics. Okay, GPA scores are horrible in this city. Let me focus on that and forget that's a tool to lead teenagers to Jesus. Or you can focus on, oh man, so many people are getting pregnant before marriage and there's babies out of wedlock, no fathers around. And you can focus on that and you end up becoming a organization of inspiration and motivation versus an organization that Jesus is the center of. So I would like to say, these goals and how I do it is sometimes I have to be the good bad guy, if that makes sense. Like, hey, I have a lot of help. I got a lot of people want to mentor students. And I'm like, wait, nobody's talking about Jesus here. No one's trying to move no one to Jesus. And what can happen is people are so hurt. I have people in our community so hurt, parents so upset, lives so messed up that they just want help, immediate, natural help. Don't tell me nothing spiritual. Don't give me no Jesus right now. I'm in poverty. And so what I found is so hard. You lose track of your North Star because you're seeing the remorse, you're seeing the need. And but at the same time, you have to remind yourself, wait, I'm a pastor. Jesus is the best tool I have. So even though we have tutoring setting up this month, and we're doing in-reach tutoring with our community center, and we have all these kids from the streets coming in and using our computers because they don't have them at home. If we don't give them Jesus by the end of the week, no, well done, my good and faithful servant. You see what I'm trying to say? And so it's like, that's the balance I'm finding out in my area, in my community. Sorry, it sounds so passionate.
Did you just do the dab right there at the end of that? I felt like I saw the dab come in.
I could have did it. Felt so passionate on that one. But that's a challenge. I believe it's a challenge for other people who are watching too. I mean, we have diverse youth ministries. It's not about, color or whatever. I'm pretty sure other youth ministries, you have students who from different economic situations, and it can be a challenge sometimes. After I get Jesus, why is my life not changing? So, yeah.
Well, we've got 5 more minutes to honor everyone's time. So I know that we just barely scraped the surface here. A couple of things that we could consider. Corey mentioned his audio isn't working too well, so I'm going to read his comment in the chat here. He quoted from the report, "A substantial majority of church leaders choose discipleship and spiritual instruction as one of their highest priorities. 7 in 10 senior pastors, 71%, and 3/4 of youth pastors, 75%, say this is one of their top goals." Corey then says, "I think it's great that we agree, but at the same time, find it crazy that 29 to 25% don't say discipleship and spiritual instruction is not one of the top goals." And I think that just kind of piggybacks off of a lot of what everyone's already been saying. And to lean into the topic of contextualization, I think is really important in a lot of this stuff, because we do define it a little bit differently, and we all have a little bit of different way in which things can work in our communities and can't. And a lot of those discussions are kind of happening in the live chat on the YouTube page right now too. There's lots of questions there. But with the 4 minutes that we've got left, what is a final thought that y'all feel like we need to take away from the Barna report? Like, if you had to scrape off just that top cream of what is the golden nugget that you can take and use in your ministry that helps you understand youth ministry in your perspective, what would that be?
Everybody at once. Well, I really like the data tables at the back of the report in the appendix. They're helpful. So one of the things that it tells me as I'm working with the pastor, with youth pastors, is that dissonance between perception of, with discipleship, and that discipleship requires relationship. So, for an example, that 36% of pastors think that building relationships with youth is important or a goal, where 44% of youth pastors think that same thing. So they're really helpful as I'm thinking about my own context. How do people who are in the same context view this, and the dissonance between myself and my pastor, and how do I try to narrow that gap as much as I possibly can? Yeah.
I think there was some things that I loved about it. In that, I was talking with Corey about this a lot as I was reading through it, that it affirmed some things that I believe, but almost just sometimes wonder if it was only my little belief, and it wasn't something that was shared across the board. And so I was super excited about that. But one thing, when I go back, and I'm super passionate about campus ministry, and I get that that's not on everybody's radar. And so I go back and I look to the outreach to students and the outreach to parents. And I love the discussion on how do we move out into their culture a heck of a lot more than maybe we're afraid to. And there's a lot of fear in that, because we're afraid of what are other students going to think, I'm going to feel awkward, and what if they don't accept me? And I'm like, dude, those are really those are misnomers. And so I love that conversation, and I hope that generates a lot more desire to do that.
Yeah, kind of to jump off what Eric had said, man. Yeah, one of the shocking things is the disconnect between what senior pastors and what youth pastors think. So my last challenge to any of the people viewing right now is open those lines of communication. Right, talk to your senior pastor and figure out how you can get on the same page, because if not, you're just going to be fighting back and forth, and things aren't going to get accomplished like they should. So, yeah, definitely.
I probably already spoke to this a little bit, but I guess for me, really, understanding the dissonance between youth pastors and parents is a really big part of this, really important part of this report for me. One of our most important calls is to come alongside parents as they seek to raise their kids as disciples of Christ. And understanding the difference between where they're at in different areas versus where we're at is vitally important to coming alongside them. There's probably places we need to meet in the middle. There are probably places where they need to come over to maybe to where we're thinking, and vice versa, where we need to maybe move more toward where parents are at on certain issues. But understanding just the differences that exist between where we are and where parents are at, it's important. It's vitally important if we're going to work together with them on helping, aiding them in raising their kids for Jesus. So that's the biggest and most helpful thing I think I got from the report is just getting that dissonance, understanding that dissonance a little more.
Yeah, and Matt, that's a scary thing for a lot of youth pastors. They just don't know how to do parent ministry. And in the report, it actually says, I'm reading on page 26 of this report, that parents are overwhelmingly satisfied with their youth leader. More than 9 out of 10 say that they are very, which is 59%, or somewhat, 36%, satisfied with him or her. And so just lean in on that. This is a spot that we're all trying to figure out. This hasn't been the norm. We are now in a generation where parents aren't necessarily Christians. Parents haven't gone to church. Parents don't know some of the language and some of the tendencies that churches have done for years. And so they are encouraged by what we're doing. They see value in it. And so lean into that. Just take it a relationship at a time and see how it can go.
Agreed.
Something that kind of, I guess, for me, to help me as a pastor, youth pastor, was I was on page 24. It says that the percentage of youth pastors reaching teens outside the church is, it's extremely low. And so looking at that, it's challenging me to get outside, get out of my office. I read a book by Alvin Reed. It says, get out of the youth room, get out of your office, get out and hang out with people at Starbucks, at their schools, wherever it is. And so I think that's something we've known for a while, that teenagers are not coming into our churches like they used to hang out with us, like the 60s, 70s, or whatever. But now it's time for us to get out. And so I think that's one of the things I took from this is it's an echo or a reminder: get out of the office, get out and go spend time with students. Something we've been saying here today, but just get out and go do life with teenagers.
Chick-fil-A.
Hey, that's right. I love it.
Yeah, I would just affirm the parental side, that I think we as youth ministers need to be doing a lot more to be engaging with parents. The fact that the report does state that that parents are satisfied with what we're doing, that's a huge affirmation to what youth ministers around the country have been doing. I think it still, though, is a fearful place for us to step into, whether it's fear of rejection or fear of being told we're not doing what they want. I think we need to really step into that, because ministering to the family as a whole is going to help that student grow in their relationship with Jesus. We only get to be with them for X amount of hours a week. So influence as well, administering, like we've talked about, the parents who may not be Christians or may not have grown up in the church. I think that's a huge thing that stuck out from the Barna report. And for me, I'm excited to really just make sure we step into that even more so in the ministry context I'm in.
That's good. Anyone else have a thought they want to leave us with? Well, I'll read Corey's. He sent another one in our chat. He said, nearly all parents feel the service activities their teen participates in will have a lasting impact. We need to lean into this and help teens find their place to serve. About 1 in 5 serve consistently at least once a week, and we need to own our part in building that up. I think that's good. And for everyone that was engaging in the chat online, I'm sorry we didn't get to bring as many of those questions over as we probably would have liked to, but there's some great conversations happening with folks on there. So if you are planning to ask a question and you want to, but you get cut off for some reason, feel free to email us, ys@youthspecialties.com, a question, and we will get back to you that way. And if there's anything else that you need from our end besides getting a hold of a copy, of this report, you can go to the YS store. There's actually a main link on the YS store that pulls it up, as well as in the video description if you're watching this on YouTube. In the video description, the very last link at the bottom is a link to pick up your own copy. So if there's anything else you need from us, reach out to everyone else that was on this panel. Thank y'all so much for taking the time. For everyone watching, we appreciate you, and thank you for allowing us to partner with you to do youth ministry. So we will catch you on the other side in a couple of weeks with another panel discussion. Look for information on that on our blog and our social channels, and we will see you there. Thanks, y'all.